Howdy, folks, and welcome to Saddle and Sixskin. For those of you tuning in for the first time, we're all about tales from the Old West, stories of grit, determination, and the kind of folks who carved a life out of the untamed frontier. We gear our stories for older folks, like myself, from 30 to 75 years old, and especially those over 40 years old. Now, before we get started, if you're enjoying these stories, remember to hit that like button and consider subscribing to Saddle and Sixskin. It helps us keep the campfire burning. So, settle in, grab a cup of joe, and let's spin a yarn together. The year is 1887, and the Montana Territory ain't for the faint of heart. The wind, it howls like a banshee, carrying Nathan Xavier's grim expression across the frozen plains. He's a man weathered by sun and sorrow, but today, something catches his eye. There, huddled in the snow, is a woman, half-frozen, desperate, and clinging to a quilt that offers little protection against the brutal cold. Her face is pale, her eyes unfocused, and the bitter temperature has turned her lips blue and numb. It's a scene that would stir the hardest of hearts, and Nathan, despite his rugged exterior, is about to face a dilemma that will change his life. Barely audible over the relentless wind, she whispers, "Please, I've nowhere to go." Nathan, a man of the West, has seen his share of hardship, and knows not to trust just anyone, especially when the harsh realities of the frontier can push people to desperate measures. At 32, he's learned hard lessons, but he's not completely devoid of compassion. But how can he turn his back on a woman in such a state? "Where'd you come from?" he asks, his voice as rough as the terrain. He remains mounted on his horse, cautiously sizing up the situation. "Silver Creek, the stagecoach left me behind, when I couldn't pay the full fare." She struggles to stand, her thin frame trembling uncontrollably. "They called me useless, said I'd be better off dead than taking up space." Have you had similar encounters? Have you ever been stranded or had to rely on the kindness of strangers? Consider liking or subscribing to Saddle and Sixskin, so more people can hear the history of the West. Nathan sighs, a sound that carries the weight of the world. He's heard of stage drivers like that, ruthless men who value profit over human decency. He'd rather not get involved, but the thought of leaving her to freeze is more than he can bear. So, against his better judgment, he extends a gloved hand. "Name's Nathan Xavier. Got a ranch 10 miles north. You can warm up there, then figure out your next move come morning." A wave of relief washes over her face as she reaches for his hand. "Grace Bennett. I promise I won't be any trouble." Nathan hoists her onto his horse, noticing how light she feels. "Everyone's trouble, Miss Bennett, just a matter of what kind. Have you ever found yourself doing something against your better judgment? Why did you do it? Have you seen the goodness in people when the world seems dark? Share your story." The ride to Nathan's cabin is a silent ordeal, punctuated only by the howling wind and Grace's occasional shuddering breaths. As the sky darkens, his property comes into view, a modest cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, a sturdy barn, and fenced pastures stretching into the distance. It ain't much compared to the vast ranches owned by the wealthy cattle barons, but it's his, earned through years of hard work and careful saving. As they approach, a border collie named Scout races out to greet them, barking excitedly. "That's Scout," Nathan says, helping Grace dismount. Her legs buckle, and he catches her before she falls. "Been with me 5 years now. Best cattle dog in the territory." Inside the cabin, simplicity reigns. A fire crackles merrily in the hearth, casting flickering light across the wooden floors and sparse furnishings. There's a table with 2 chairs, a bookshelf filled with well-worn books, and a rocking chair near the fire. A narrow bed occupies one corner, while a curtained-off area likely holds another sleeping space. "You can take the bed tonight," Nathan says, gesturing toward it. "I'll sleep in the chair." Grace shakes her head firmly. "I couldn't possibly." "It's not a request," he interrupts. "You're half frozen, you need proper rest." Too exhausted to argue, Grace nods gratefully. Nathan busies himself preparing a simple meal of beans and salt pork while she huddles by the fire, slowly regaining feeling in her limbs. You can show your support by liking or subscribing to Saddle and Sixskin. Is the modern world a simple world? Does technology solve our problems, or does it create more? Has technology made us more connected to one another or more isolated? Do you know your neighbor's name? If you don't mind me asking, Nathan says as he places a steaming plate before her, what brings a woman alone to these parts? Not exactly hospitable country. Grace hesitates, her eyes fixed on the food. I was a teacher in Illinois, lost my position when the school board chairman's son failed my class. She gives a bitter laugh. I heard Montana needed educators. What they failed to mention was they wanted someone who could teach and manage a household. I've never been particularly skilled at domestic affairs. Nathan raises an eyebrow. That why they called you useless? Her cheeks flush. That, and I spent what little money I had on books instead of proper winter clothing. Has formal education and skills kept up with the modern world? Are skills taught in college applicable to the real world? The stagecoach driver said I was useless as a three-legged horse, when I couldn't cook for the passengers or mend one man's torn jacket. She meets his gaze defiantly. I know my worth isn't measured by such things, but out here it seems that's all that matters. Out here, survival matters, Nathan corrects. Everything else is a luxury. They eat in silence, Grace clearly savoring each bite of the simple meal. When they finish, Nathan clears the plates and fetches a worn nightshirt from a trunk. It'll be too big, but it's clean, he says, handing it to her. I'll step outside while you change. True to his word, Nathan exits the cabin, giving Grace privacy. When he returns, she's already in bed, her travel-worn clothes neatly folded atop her small carpet bag. Thank you, she says softly as he settles into the chair, wrapping a blanket around himself. For everything. Nathan merely grunts in response, watching the fire until her breathing deepens into sleep. Does society still value domestic skills? Is there a societal pressure to conform, even today? I encourage you to like or subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin. Morning arrives with a brutal snowstorm that makes travel impossible. Nathan rises early, stokes the fire, and pulls on his coat. Need to check the livestock, he tells a groggy Grace. Stay inside. Storm's bad. He spends 2 grueling hours making sure his small herd of cattle has access to food and water, breaking ice and distributing hay while the wind threatens to knock him off his feet. By the time he returns to the cabin, his fingers are numb and his face raw from the cold. But the scent that greets him stops him in his tracks, fresh bread. He hasn't had that in, well, he can't remember when. Grace stands at his small stove, her hair tied back, carefully removing a golden loaf from the oven. The table is set with 2 plates and a pot of something bubbling on the stove. You're back, she exclaims, her face lighting up. I hope you don't mind, I found flour and decided to make myself useful. Nathan stomps the snow from his boots, his expression guarded. Thought you weren't domestic. I said I wasn't particularly skilled, she corrects with a small smile. Not that I couldn't manage the basics. Besides, bread is just chemistry, flour, water, salt, and time. Skeptical but hungry, Nathan washes up and sits at the table. Grace serves him a bowl of stew, a creative concoction of preserved vegetables, dried beef, and herbs he'd forgotten he had, alongside a slice of warm bread. Want to hear more Wild West stories? If so, be sure to like and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin. The first bite almost makes him groan aloud. It ain't fancy, but it's the best meal he's had in months. This is good, he admits grudgingly. Grace beams. Thank you. I also organized your medical supplies. They were scattered everywhere. I hope that's all right. Nathan glances toward the shelf where he keeps his various salves, bandages, and medicines. Previously a chaotic jumble, they now stand in neat rows, clearly labeled. "How do you know what was what?" he asks between bites. "My father was a doctor," she explains. "I assisted him until he passed." "You have quite a collection, some items I haven't seen outside a proper surgery." Nathan shifts uncomfortably. "Did some medical work during the war, habit of collecting supplies stuck." Grace nods, not pressing for details. "Well, now you can find what you need in an emergency." The storm rages for 3 days, keeping them confined to the cabin. Initially, Nathan expects to find the arrangement intolerable. He's lived alone for years by choice, not circumstance. To his surprise, Grace proves to be both unobtrusive and unexpectedly helpful. On the second day, she discovers his collection of books and spends hours organizing them by subject and author, occasionally reading passages aloud in a clear, expressive voice that makes even dry historical text sound interesting. When she finds his neglected ledger books, she offers to help straighten his accounts. "I'm quite good with figures," she says. "Taught mathematics alongside literature." Reluctantly, Nathan allows her to review his haphazard records. By evening, she's produced a comprehensive accounting of his ranch's finances for the past year, revealing both where he was losing money and opportunities he'd missed. "If you invested in better breeding stock next spring," she suggests, showing him her calculations, "you could increase your profit by nearly 30% within 2 years. Nathan studies the neat columns of numbers, impressed despite himself. "Where'd you learn this?" "Don't recall this being standard ladies' education." "My grandfather owned a small mercantile," Grace explains. "He believed women should understand business as well as men do, said it was foolish to limit half the population's potential." Her expression turns wistful. He was ahead of his time. On the third day, the storm finally breaks, leaving behind a transformed landscape of pristine white. Nathan stands on his porch, assessing the minimal damage, thankfully, while considering his unexpected house guest. By all rights, he should be eager to see her on her way. Instead, he finds himself dreading the conversation about her departure. She'd proven herself far from useless. In fact, she'd improved his daily life in countless small ways he hadn't realized needed improving. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Grace says, joining him on the porch. She's wrapped herself in one of his old blankets, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "Like everything's been made new." Nathan nods, unable to disagree. "Roads should be passable in a day or 2. I can take you to Whitefish, then. There's a train station." Grace's smile falters slightly. "Of course, I've imposed long enough." "Wasn't an imposition," Nathan says gruffly, surprising himself with his honesty. "You've been helpful." "High praise indeed from a man of few words," she teases, though her eyes remain serious. "Thank you, for saying so. Those men on the stage a coach, their words affected me more than I care to admit." Nathan turns to face her fully. "Those men were fools. Value of a person isn't measured by how well they cook or sew." "What is it measured by, then?" she asks softly. "Character," he answers without hesitation. "Kindness, intelligence." He pauses, feeling uncharacteristically flustered under her steady gaze. "You've got plenty of all 3. A delicate blush colors her cheeks. "I appreciate that, Mr. Xavier." "Nathan," he corrects. "Think we're past formalities." "Nathan," she repeats, her voice warming the cold air between them. "And I'm Grace. If you are enjoying this story so far, be sure to like or subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin." That evening, Nathan surprises Grace by pulling out a chessboard he'd carved himself years ago. "You play?" he asks, setting up the pieces. "I do," she confirms, her eyes lighting up. "Though I warn you, I'm rather good." She wasn't exaggerating. 3 games later, Nathan stares at the board in disbelief as she corners his king yet again. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he demands, not entirely displeased. Grace laughs, the sound brightening the cabin more effectively than the lantern light. My grandfather again, he believed chess built character and strategic thinking. She resets the pieces, her fingers lingering on the carved knight. These are beautiful, did you make them? Nathan nods. During my first winter here, needed something to occupy my hands. You're quite talented, she observes. Have you made other things? Hesitantly, Nathan rises and goes to a trunk in the corner. From it, he withdraws several intricately carved wooden animals, a bear, an eagle, a wolf, each rendered with remarkable detail. Just passing time, he says dismissively, though his ears burn at her obvious admiration. These could sell for good money in town, Grace suggests, carefully examining the eagle. Or in the cities back east. Nathan shrugs. Never thought about selling them. You should, she insists. It's another potential income stream. Diversification is key to financial stability. The matter-of-fact way she speaks about business without condescension or unnecessary elaboration reminds Nathan why he's grown comfortable with her presence. She speaks to him as an equal, neither deferring unnecessarily nor assuming ignorance on his part. The next morning, Nathan rises early to check his trap lines. When he returns midday with 2 rabbits, he finds Grace sitting at the table with papers spread before her. What's all this? He asks, hanging his catch. I've been thinking about your situation, she says, gesturing for him to join her. You're land rich, but cash poor, which limits your ability to improve your herd. But there are ways to address that. She's drafted a comprehensive business plan for his ranch, identifying multiple revenue streams he'd never considered, selling his carvings to tourists in nearby towns, offering hunting guide services during seasons when ranch work is lighter, even starting a small orchard of hardy apple varieties that could thrive in Montana's climate. The initial investment would be minimal, she explains, showing him her calculations, and the potential return substantial within 3 to 5 years. Nathan studies her work, impressed by both the thoroughness and practicality. You've put a lot of thought into this. I enjoy problem solving, she admits. And, I. She stops abruptly, looking embarrassed. You what? He prompts. Grace hesitates. I wanted to repay your kindness somehow. This seemed the most practical way. Nathan feels something shift inside him, a wall he'd built years ago starting to crumble. No repayment necessary, he says softly, but I appreciate the effort. Their eyes meet across the table, and for a moment, neither speaks. Nathan feels an unfamiliar tightness in his chest, a sensation he'd nearly forgotten. Grace is the first to look away, her cheeks flushed. I should prepare those rabbits, she says, rising quickly. They'll make an excellent stew. Keep Saddle and Sixkin going by liking this video or subscribing to this channel. The roads clear the following day, making travel to town possible. Nathan saddles his horse early, intending to check on neighbors and gather news. He finds Grace in the barn, confidently feeding his 2 milk cows. They're lovely animals, she says when she notices him watching. Especially the Jersey. Her milk yield must be impressive. Nathan nods, impressed by her knowledge. Planning to head into town. Need anything? Perhaps some writing paper, if it's not too much trouble, she replies. I should write to my aunt in Vermont. She'll be worried about my silence. The mention of communication with family reminds Nathan that Grace's stay is temporary, a reality he's begun to forget in their comfortable routine. The thought sits uneasily as he rides into Whitefish. The town is bustling despite the recent storm, with shopkeepers clearing paths and travelers finally continuing journeys long delayed. Nathan completes his errands efficiently, purchasing the paper Grace requested along with a few other supplies. As he secures his purchases to his saddle, a familiar voice calls his name. Xavier. That really you, coming into civilization voluntarily? Nathan turns to see Marshall Davis, the local lawman and one of the few people Nathan considers a friend. Marshall, he greets with a nod. Just restocking after the storm. Davis falls into step beside him. Heard you might have company up at your place. Stage-a-coach driver was running his mouth about abandoning some useless woman during the storm, said she was heading toward your property. His expression darkens. Been meaning to ride out and check, but the weather had other ideas. She's fine, Nathan confirms. Name's Grace Bennett, former teacher. Driver was wrong about her being useless. Davis raises an eyebrow at Nathan's defensive tone. Glad to hear it. She planning to stay in these parts? The question catches Nathan off guard. In truth, they haven't discussed Grace's plans beyond getting her to the train station. The realization bothers him more than it should. Don't know, he admits. She mentioned an aunt in Vermont. Well, if she's looking for work, school board's still trying to replace old Mrs. Winters. Retirement's been official for months, but no qualified candidates. Davis shrugs. Just a thought. Nathan nods, mind already racing with possibilities. Appreciate the information. The ride back to the ranch seems longer than usual as Nathan considers what to say to Grace. The idea of her leaving twists something inside him, a feeling he hasn't experienced in years, not since losing his wife and infant son to fever in '78. He'd built his life around solitude after that, convinced it was safer than risking such pain again. Yet, in just a week, Grace has carved out a place in his home, and, he reluctantly admits, his heart. Her intelligence, resilience, and quiet strength remind him that there's more to life than mere survival. He finds her in the cabin, reading one of his medical texts by the fire. Scout curled contentedly at her feet. She looks up with a smile that warms him more thoroughly than the crackling flames. How was town? She asks, marking her place in the book. Nathan sets down his purchases. Informative, school's looking for a teacher. Grace's eyes widen. Here in Whitefish? Previous teacher retired, no replacement yet. He busies himself unpacking supplies, avoiding her gaze. Thought you might be interested. Yes, I would be, she says, standing quickly. That's exactly the opportunity one was hoping for when I came west. Nathan nods, still not looking at her. Train to Helena leaves tomorrow, could take you to the station if you want to continue your journey, or, he finally meets her eyes. Could introduce you to the school board here. Grace studies his face, her expression thoughtful. What would you prefer, Nathan? The directness of her question catches him off guard. He'd expected her to make her decision without consulting his feelings on the matter, that she cared enough to ask speaks volumes. Prefer you stayed, he admits gruffly. You're good company, and good for this place. He gestures around the cabin, which has never felt more like a home than during her stay. But it's your choice, won't hold you to anything out of obligation. Grace moves closer, her eyes never leaving his. It's not obligation I'm feeling, Nathan. The air between them changes, charged with unspoken possibilities. Nathan finds himself stepping forward, closing the distance until they stand mere inches apart. What are you feeling, then? He asks, voice low. That perhaps I've found where I belong, she whispers. Not just a place, but a person. Nathan's calloused hand rises to her cheek, thumb gently tracing her jawline. Been alone a long time, not sure I remember how to be anything else. We could learn together, Grace suggests, leaning slightly into his touch, if you wanted to. Instead of answering with words, Nathan lowers his head and presses his lips to hers, gently at first, then with growing certainty as she responds eagerly. When they finally part, both breathless, he keeps her close, forehead resting against hers. Stay, he says simply. Not just for the teaching position, stay for this, for us. Grace's smile could have melted the Montana snow. I'd like nothing better. The following weeks bring rapid changes to both their lives. Grace interviews with the school board and is immediately offered the position, her credentials and obvious passion for education outweighing any concerns about her being a newcomer. She moves into the town's small teacherage during the week, returning to Nathan's ranch on weekends and holidays. Their arrangement raises eyebrows initially, but Grace's exemplary conduct as the new school teacher soon quiets most gossip. Nathan, for his part, finds himself making more frequent trips to town, often bringing along his wooden carvings which, just as Grace had predicted, sell well to travelers and locals alike. Spring arrives with its particular chaos of calving, planting, and repairs. But with Grace's organizational skills and practical support, Nathan finds the work less overwhelming than in previous years. They develop a rhythm, each complementing the other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. On a warm evening in late May, as they sit on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Nathan reaches for Grace's hand. "Been thinking," he says, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "A dangerous pastime," she teases gently. He smiles, squeezing her fingers. "This arrangement we have, you in town, me here, it works, but, she prompts when he hesitates. "Rather have you here, all the time." He turns to face her fully. "Proper though, as my wife." Grace's eyes widen then fill with tears that catch the fading sunlight. "Nathan Xavier, are you proposing marriage?" "Doing my best at it," he confirms with a self-deprecating chuckle. "Not particularly eloquent." "Eloquence is overrated," she declares, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Be sure to like and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin, so you never miss our stories. They marry in July, a simple ceremony in Whitefish's small church with Marshall Davis as best man and several of Grace's students scattering wild flowers in her path. Nathan wears a new suit that Grace insists isn't an extravagance, but an investment. And she wears a dress of pale blue that matches the summer sky. "Never thought I'd have this again," Nathan confesses that night as they lie together in what is now truly their bed. Family, purpose, beyond just surviving. Grace traces the lines of his face in the moonlight. "The men on that stage coach did me a favor when they abandoned me, they led me to you." "Still planning to have a word with that driver," Nathan growls. "Let it go," Grace says gently. "Everything worked out perfectly, and I've proven I'm far from useless." "Never believed that for a moment," Nathan assures her, pulling her closer. "Knew your worth from the start." As summer turns to fall and then winter again, their partnership only strengthens. With Grace's business acumen and Nathan's practical skills, the ranch prospers beyond either's expectations. Her classroom flourishes equally, with students showing remarkable progress under her guidance. They face challenges, of course, drought, illness, the occasional dispute with neighboring ranchers, but together they weather each storm. And when, in their second spring together, Grace announces she's expecting a child, Nathan's joy knows no bounds. "Boy or girl, doesn't matter," he declares, placing a protective hand over her still flat stomach. "Long as they have your brains and heart. And your strength and integrity," Grace adds, covering his hand with hers. "They'll be extraordinary either way." On a crisp autumn morning in 1889, Elizabeth and Xavier enters the world with a lusty cry that her father swears can be heard clear to the mountains. With Grace's dark hair and Nathan's determined chin, she is, in the words of Dr. Simmons, perfect in every particular. As Nathan holds his daughter for the first time, gazing down at her tiny face while Grace watches with exhausted pride, he marvels at how completely his life has transformed in just 2 years, from solitary survivalist to husband, father, and successful rancher. All because a stage-coach driver had abandoned a, supposedly useless, woman near his property. "What are you thinking?" Grace asks softly, reaching for his hand. "That I'm the luckiest man in Montana Territory," he answers honestly. "That everything I never knew I wanted came to me in a snowstorm." Grace smiles, her eyes shining with love. "We found each other exactly when we needed to," some might call that fate. Some might, Nathan agrees, settling carefully beside her on the bed, their daughter nestled between them. I call it the best decision I ever made. By their 5th anniversary, the Xavier Ranch has tripled in size and productivity. Grace continues teaching, bringing Elizabeth to school with her once she's old enough, and later their son James, born 2 years after his sister. The cabin expands into a proper house with a dedicated schoolroom where Grace tutors neighboring children during summer months. Nathan's carvings become renowned throughout the territory, with orders coming from as far as San Francisco. Grace's orchard flourishes, producing apples that win prizes at the territorial fair. But their greatest achievement, both agree, is the family they've built, a home filled with love, learning, and laughter. On winter evenings, they still play chess by the fire, Grace usually winning, though Nathan's skills have improved considerably under her tutelage. They read aloud from their ever-expanding library, discuss politics and philosophy, and plan for their children's future with optimistic practicality. And sometimes, when the children are asleep and the house is quiet, Nathan will take Grace's hand and lead her to the porch, where they'll stand together looking at the stars, remembering that first winter and marveling at how a moment of compassion changed everything. "You ever regret it?" Grace asks once. "Stopping for a stranger in the snow." Nathan pulls her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Only regret is that I almost didn't, can't imagine this life without you in it." "Nor I without you," she whispers back. "My useless self found purpose here." "Never useless," he corrects firmly. "Just waiting to find where you belonged." Grace smiles up at him, the love of years shining in her eyes. "I belonged with you, always." In the vast Montana sky above them, stars wink their agreement, bearing witness to a love that began in the harshest of winters but bloomed into something more enduring than the mountains themselves. Proof that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful stories. If you want to hear more Wild West stories, like this, then be sure to like and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin.